Hello there, and welcome back to Knights of the Nerd Republic. I am your host, Jared the Dark Jedi Bachman Stubbs. You can find all of us here at the Nerd Academy Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and on our website, www.thenerdacademypodcast.com. Our shows, the Nerd Academy Podcast, Knights of the Nerd Republic, and Campus Life are released weekly at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to check out our Patreon, where every donation helps us keep the lights on. Hello there, and welcome to the Knights of the Nerd Republic Versus Series, hosted by myself, Jared the Dark Jedi Bachman Stubbs, and Spencer the Mando Simpson.
We are so excited to bring you this episode, everybody. This is something that Jared and I have been wanting to put together for years now, and it's finally come together, and we are so pumped to bring you this episode.
Pumped is an understatement. So just a real quick rundown. I know we've brought it up on the shows before, but just reiterating it here so you guys are aware. The Versus series is going to be mostly Patreon content. I say mostly because future episodes will be uploaded to the main podcast feed for the Nerd Academy Podcast as bonus episodes. So if there's no news, if there's a week where there's no news and nothing to review necessarily, or we can't all get together and there's a scheduling snafu, you will get another episode of the Versus series and content like this. However, since it is May the 4th, and since this is the first episode, just like we did with Campus Life, we're going to send it straight into the general population for you guys to get a little taste of this. This is Spencer and this is our first time taking a crack at the whole Versus series game. This was something that I think I can honestly say enhanced my fandom. Back in high school, was falling in to the Versus series rabbit hole very, 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 very hard.
Head first.
So yeah, we're very excited to bring this to you and put our own swing on it, put our own spin on things.
Yes, and correct me if I'm wrong, Stubby, but patrons will be able to suggest future Versus matchups. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely.
Good. So yeah, so if you like what you're hearing here and you have something that you've really wanted to hear a couple nerds hash out in front of a microphone, then sign up for our Patreon and contact us through our Discord, and we'll take a crack at it. So are you ready?
Do you want to break down the format?
Yes. So just a couple things that we want to touch upon before we get going, so you guys know what to expect from the episode and how we're going to structure it, as well as considerations for the franchise itself. So first thing that we're going to touch upon is how we're going to be treating Legends content. So for the most part, we are going to use canon-only content. However, if there is supplementary material or a comic book or a video game or something that does not directly conflict with something that has been confirmed in canon, but is useful to understanding how the character thinks or how they fight or the abilities that they incorporate in their fighting style and stuff like that, then we will incorporate that as supplementary material. But again, only so long as it doesn't directly conflict with any canon material that we have so far.
Yeah, I think the best example would be that if we did Old Man Luke, we could not fairly list feats he accomplished during the Yuuzhan Vong War. That's because there's no way to honestly gauge whether or not he's capable of that in canon.
Next thing, so Jared and I are approaching this in a semi-classical debate format. Between the two characters, we each took one of them and did the in-depth research for that character. So there will be an inherent bias from one of us to the other just by nature of the specificity of our research for this project, for this Versus series. But again, we are going to be discussing it in terms of, point and counterpoint, not necessarily as a I want my side to win and you and Jared wants his side to win. But we are going to think through it and come to the most likely conclusion that we can see as a team. So it's not a strictly debate style, but it is going to be a little bit of point counterpoint as we go along.
Absolutely.
And you know, I might not always be defending my character. I might be defending the character that Jared researched as well. But again, we're not strictly choosing sides, but that is going to be the general format. Now, in terms of the content within the format, we've chosen 5 categories for how to really break down the characters and what they bring to a fight. And those 5 categories are physical attributes, their physiology, their build, their athleticism, stuff like that. Martial arts, their fighting style, ability, stuff like that. Force ability, which force which force abilities that they implement in their fighting style and how they use them, how well they use them. The 4th one is weapons and equipment. And then the last one is tactical ability and mindset. You know, what mind frame, what tactical approach do they take to a fight in general. So those categories, again, just real quick: physical attributes, martial arts, force ability, weapons and equipment, and tactical ability and mindset. So within those 5 categories, we are going to discuss them in detail, one at a time, and then we are going to give a hard verdict to one or the other for each category. And then after we have gone through all of those categories, we are going to do a theoretical fight breakdown at the end. It's not going to be like a strict narrative. We haven't written something up beforehand, and we are just going to talk about it, do a hypothetical, like this is how the fight would likely go were they to meet up. Now, that being said, it's going to be difficult. It would have been difficult, I should say, for us to write down a strict narrative before we started, because we have chosen before we sat down to record here today, we brainstormed and came up with 10 potential arenas, you know, the setting of the fight. And we have not yet decided which one of those arenas we are going to use for this episode. We have decided 10 of them, and whenever the time comes, we are going to use Hey Siri, random number generator. Hold on, I gotta shut off my phone because it came awake just now. We're going to use a random number generator to choose which setting for the fight we're going to consider for the match. What did I miss?
Nothing else except to introduce our combatants. And with that, our combatants for our pilot episode are the hero, without fear, the chosen one himself, Anakin Skywalker, going toe to metal toe with the Phantom Apprentice, Darth Maul, the current King of Mandalore. Spencer and I have gone back and forth over the course of production of this as to what version of Maul to use, right. And have been racking our brains as to what the most fair and entertaining possible matchup we could do would be. And after his showing in the Phantom Apprentice episode of Clone Wars, we agreed that it would be the most interesting if we did him circa that episode. Our biggest hang up with not using Clone Wars, like the majority of Clone Wars Maul, is his mental state. Spencer and I kind of agreed that it would be unfair to have a version of Maul who is so incredibly off his rocker and bloodthirsty and foaming at the mouth constantly, to pit him up against Anakin, who is able to harness that better, and kind of agreed that that version of Maul would get railroaded by Anakin. And it wouldn't make for an interesting analysis. However, a version of Maul that has calmed down so much, but is still like ready to take a life as quickly as he is, has made Spencer and I reverse course from doing Phantom Menace Maul. That said, Anakin knows who Darth Maul is, and Maul knows who Anakin Skywalker is. So that is how we're going to be handling the fight, with the knowledge of the other one and the motivations therein. But we'll talk more about that in the mindset category. So with that, I think we are ready. Mr. Simpson, the floor is yours.
Introducing our first contender, Maul. Maul was born on Dathomir to the Night Sister Witch Mother Talzin. Talzin was convinced to hand her son over to the Sith Lord Darth Sidious to be trained as the Dark Lord's apprentice. Darth Maul was honed into a living weapon, his existence having one goal, the destruction of the Jedi. Maul was dispatched to aid the Trade Federation during the Naboo crisis, where he'd go on to kill Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn and have his lower half cleaved away by Obi-Wan Kenobi, thus inciting his bitter hatred for him. Maul was presumed dead until he resurfaced again during the Clone Wars, where he'd make several attempts to kill his rival Kenobi. During this time, Maul became a kingpin in the galactic underworld, but was brought down by Sidious when his brother was killed during a brutal battle on Mandalore. Maul eventually reformed his syndicate as the Crimson Dawn. In his later years, Maul would seek Kenobi one final time to exact his vengeance, but Kenobi bested Maul in their final brief duel, finally killing the son of Dathomir. Jared, would you care to introduce our contender?
Oh, I would love to introduce Sandy Lowground himself. Born into slavery and raised on the harsh desert world of Tatooine, Anakin Skywalker was discovered by Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn at the age of 9, believing the boy to be the prophesied chosen one. After Qui-Gon was killed during the Naboo crisis, Anakin's training was taken over by Jinn's apprentice, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Kenobi brought Anakin up during the lead-up to the Clone Wars, the start of which brought about Anakin's knighthood. Over the course of the war, Skywalker's power grew as his faith in the Jedi diminished. As he feared for the life of his clandestine wife, Padme Amidala, he fell to the dark side in an attempt to find power of which to save her. He failed, and his remaining humanity was lost as he became the newly anointed Darth Vader. Vader would eventually return to the light, saving his son Luke, destroying the Sith, and fulfilling the prophecy, bringing balance to the Force.
Now that you've gotten to know these characters that you probably already know very well, but we just decided to throw in a cute little bio at the beginning because
it's fun.
It is fun. We like writing little bios. So, without further ado, we are going to move into our first category, physical attributes. So, we're going to take into account things like their alien race, their athletic, composition, their build, their stuff like that, and we're going to discuss that and figure out which one would have the edge just on this category. So, just in terms of the bare bones, Maul is 5'9". So he's shorter than Anakin, but he's not human. He is a Zabrak male, and Zabrak physiology is different than humans in that Maul has 2 hearts, and as a result of this, he also has a very high endurance, great stamina for physical activity. In addition to this, Zabraks have a physiological advantage in that they have a very high pain tolerance. Typically, this isn't unique to Maul. Eth Koth was the same way. It's a race wide advantage that they have a high pain tolerance. In terms of Maul's build, he is slim but athletic, incredibly dexterous and gymnastic. He is swift in his movements, very agile, very precise, very acrobatic. So he isn't a bulky fighter. He's slim, but he is precise, and he is toned. He's very muscular, but again, not in a super bulky sort of way. Jared?
Yeah, so with Anakin's physical attributes, he stands at a towering 6'1", as well as an athletic build like Maul. Only he's a little bit more bulky, not muscle bound by any means. He is sporting a cybernetic right arm. which obviously he lost his right arm for the first time to Count Dooku on Geonosis. And even though he lost that arm, since it's not the real world, he basically got an upgrade. So he has enhanced gripping strength and can deal a little bit more physical damage with that cybernetic prosthesis than he could with his organic hand. He's very fast on his feet and agile. He's an acrobat in his own right. He doesn't necessarily rely on it quite as much as Maul does, but that is still something he has to his disposal. He was the only human pod racer in the galaxy and was capable of winning a pod race at the age of 9. As Qui-Gon said, that required incredible reflexes and motor control at a very young age. And at one point, just with physical feats, he caught and stopped a punch from a Magna Guard with his cybernetic hand, which even though he did that with his prosthesis, that's still... Yeah, he had to be faster and stronger than a machine.
Right. Yeah.
And
it takes more than just the cybernetic hand to stop a punch from a robot. It takes the whole rest of you standing your ground as well.
Yeah. And in that scene, we do hear like the metal start to creak. So I don't think he crushed the Magna Guard's hand, but at the very least, he started to dent the metal. And then even though this is Legends, based on the other ways that Anakin has been brutalized in canon, I think it's safe to say that this would hold up. He sustained a beating from the bounty hunter Dirge at one point, who is incredibly muscle-bound, very heavy armor, and beat the ever-loving tar out of Anakin at one point, and he still got back up. And we've seen Anakin get tortured over the course of the Clone Wars several times, between being pretty good at tanking a wave of Force lightning and the occasional zaps from Magna Guard's electro staves. A very, very tumultuous history with Magna Guards, Anakin. Lots of history there. But yeah, I also, this probably wasn't in there because we did kind of make the call on Maul a little bit last minute. Cybernetic lower half for him, obviously.
Right. Which, if I'm remembering correctly, bumps him up to about 6'1", 6'2".
Yeah.
I remember reading that on the Wikipedia page just because, like, how tall is the guy? And Ray Park isn't a super tall dude. So it makes sense why Maul would be 5'9" in The Phantom Menace. But then it specifically said it had two different heights for him. It was like 5'9", but then 6'2" with mechanical legs. And I was like, all right, it's like if you have the chance to have a do-over, you might as well make yourself a couple inches taller, right?
Following up on that with a little bit of a tangent of my own, looking up stats for Anakin is absolutely hilarious because the entire page is like that.
Yeah.
Every single physical trait is like, it goes, oh, he has like dark blonde to brown hair. Bald.
Until he has no hair.
Yeah, until he's bald. He has blue eyes until they're yellow. His skin is like normal Caucasian until it's ghastly white.
Yeah.
he's 6'1" until he's 6'5". So, very fun parallels here. Obviously with the characters, both apprentices to Sidious at one point or another.
Right.
You have the bitter rivalry that crops up between them with Maul's jealousy of being replaced yet again. So lots of shared attributes, and both of them cyborgs by the hand of Obi-Wan Kenobi.
How nice. They should start a club.
They should.
Boy band.
A boy band of Darth Vader, General Grievous, and Darth Maul is something that I would pay top dollar to see. With that, I think the physical edge is pretty decisive here.
I agree. Even though it's this match, as Jared and I were talking about it and like working through it, we decided that however this goes, it's not going to be a close match. Like, it's going to be a long and difficult one no matter what. So that being said, we are not going to be giving out very many landslide advantages with these categories, or even with the final verdict. but just merely in the case of his physiological ability and advantage, we're going to go ahead and give Darth Maul the advantage for physical attributes. Again, it's close. Their builds are much the same in terms of how muscular they are versus how toned and specified their movements. But you can't beat having twice as many hearts as your opponent when it comes to a long duel. And the more we talk about it, the more we consider their fighting styles, it's going to be a long match. And,
yes.
And so, go ahead.
No, I was also going to say, and something that also goes into consideration is how a lot of these categories cross over.
Yeah,
especially considering martial arts ability, knowing how much Maul implements physical strikes, kicks especially.
Correct.
Now that we're taking into consideration the cybernetic legs, like that's going to hurt a lot more catching just a Durasteel foot to the jaw versus just a normal boot.
And based on his fighting style, it's a lot more likely that Maul is going to throw a foot than it is that Anakin is going to throw a hand.
Yeah.
And so, like, just by nature of the fighting styles themselves and the cybernetic enhancements that they have, Maul's is going to be a lot more difficult to deal with than Anakin's is. But again, they both have that disadvantage. So if they find their way into a lightning storm, it's going to be bad news for both of them.
Yeah.
But, but only, I think it would be worse news for Maul because he can't walk, but like at least Anakin's got one good arm to work with.
Yeah.
But again, the likelihood of them going into a situation where they're both they both have their cybernetic enhancements incapacitated, just like wholesale, is not very likely. So I think we can expect both of them to not have their cybernetic limbs be a decided disadvantage at any point in the match.
Yeah, I think if we were using a character who could use Force Lightning, this would be a different conversation.
This would be a completely different story. However, as like even up to Rebels, we've never seen Maul use Force Lightning.
No.
That's not ever something that he reached his training for with Sidious, and so on both of their counts, it's not something that we have to worry about. So that being said, we're going to set aside the cybernetic element of it, and based on Maul's physiology, we're going to give him the physical advantage again, but it's not a landslide again.
Yeah, Anakin can hold court with him. It's just
absolutely
on paper.
When you're going blow to blow, it's almost impossible to choose a clear advantage in terms of just strength and build. But in a fight as long as this one is, the extra endurance is going to do a lot for Maul. Moving right along, Stubby, you want to take away the next category?
Gladly. The one that I think is going to be the most important to this fight
110%
is going to be their martial arts ability. Anakin Skywalker, pretty much from the beginning, was a Form 5 specialist. Before the start of the Clone War, before his first real lightsaber duel with Count Dooku, Anakin specialized in the Xi'an variant of Form 5, the determination form. Form 5 has always been characterized by like the maxim of peace through superior firepower. It's all about playing offense and defense all at once. So Xi'an is kind of the granddaddy of targeted blast deflection. The Ahsoka also used it. That's where you see most people who have the reverse grip on their lightsaber. That's where that style is born from more often than not. Obviously, Anakin never implemented the reverse grip that often, but that is where that comes from. And he specialized in the blast deflection because at the time, he was only really facing down blaster-wielding opponents and could really easily deal with any melee fighters because they didn't have a lightsaber. By the start of the war, and by the time Anakin was regularly rubbing shoulders with Asajj Ventress and Count Dooku, he started to take up the Jem-So variant of Form 5. Jem-So is based around lightsaber combat. It is very strength oriented, which it plays to his physical prowess as being a pretty muscular guy. He throws his weight around. One of the drawbacks of Form 5 is that it is very immobile. However, Anakin, pairing the very heavy-handed, counterattack-oriented style of Gemso off with the more acrobatic and agile and frenetic style of Ataru, Form 4, offset that. So Anakin turned into this very offensive powerhouse, where he had the strength of Gemso coming at you with the speed of Ataru, which for most people would be absurdly difficult to keep going for a long time. However, Anakin has a good track record as being somebody who can keep up an encounter for a good while. Obviously, again, it isn't canon. However, the Clone Wars micro series shows that he is up and down, countless flights of stairs against Ventress on Yavin 4. Again, that isn't canon, but I don't think it's too far out of the realm of possibility. You also, of course, have to take into account how over the top that show is on its own.
Yeah.
And his duel with Obi-Wan Kenobi speaks for itself. That fight went everywhere and pushed his physicality to its absolute max.
For sure.
And there's no telling how that fight would have ended had Obi-Wan not, taken the high ground. However, I am of the camp that I think the fight would have pretty much either gone on for much longer or eventually Anakin might have won. Just based on his sheer physicality, which is a debate for another day. He is known to incorporate physical attacks into his lightsaber sequences. Again, he's not as quick to do it as Maul. That is not necessarily as integrated into his fighting style as Maul, but it is something that he is prone to do nonetheless. Again, he uses his very overwhelming strength, force augmentated strength, his own natural strength, and also the robotic arm to help with just how hard he's coming down on his opponents. Another note from Legends, but again, it wouldn't necessarily be conflicted. Count Dooku himself, being the lightsaber snob that he is, noted Anakin, granted this is a mental note, he never actually put this on paper, but noted Anakin as the master, not a master, the master of Gemso in Dooku's time as a lightsaber duelist. As far as notable kills, victories, and feats as a combatant, he has defeated and killed Count Dooku, defeated Barriss Offee, even though that fight did kind of start at a disadvantage for him. All hell kind of broke loose, and he had to manage to bring her in prisoner instead of just steamrolling her. Has beaten Asajj Ventress quite a few times. He contended with Obi-Wan Kenobi. Again, obviously lost that fight, but it was a neck-and-neck fight for the majority of it. And even though we don't see how many he killed and know how many he killed for certain, Anakin went through the Jedi Temple during Order 66 and personally killed an untold number of Jedi. And even though we don't have a number for it, it has to be in the tens, if not the... the hundreds may be a stretch, but
at least a dozen or two at minimum.
Himself.
Likely 20 plus is what we're looking at.
Yeah, just by himself. Now, granted, the clones were all there, but still, there's no way he wasn't fighting hordes of Jedi at any given moment, including Jedi Battlemaster Sindralig.
I think, just quick sidebar, that's something that we should sit down and thoughtfully consider sometime, is given the very limited number of Jedi in the temple during Nightfall, what a comfortable and fair percentage of them Anakin himself dealt with would be, having the entire 501st at his back storming the temple with him. I wonder what a fair assessment or estimate of how many, but again, different conversation for a different day.
Yeah, there's all kinds of funky logistics that would go into that.
Just based on the 5 seconds of hologram footage that we see in episode 3, I think it's easy to assume at least 20. We're looking at 20 plus easy.
Yeah, all varying in rank. But
that excludes the younglings in the council chamber, by the way.
Yeah,
We're talking like fighting Jedi, not the lambs to the slaughter.
yeah, those don't count as combat kills. I'm not going to say that we don't count war crimes, but not that war crime.
Correct.
That said, I want to come back to the Count Dooku thing. I think a great way to measure Anakin's prowess at any moment during the war is to just like track his fights with Dooku.
Oh yeah,
because
it's a good benchmark.
Yeah, with the amount of times that he goes toe to toe with Tyrannus, like we have Attack of the Clones, he puts up a good fight, but eventually is quite literally disarmed. They fight at the beginning of the war whenever Ahsoka's first brought into the fold and they're trying to save her out of the hut. And Dooku kind of throws the fight to make Anakin run away, but he held his own against Count Dooku, and just every time they met up, Anakin came closer and closer and closer and closer to beating him, up to the point where they fight on Obadiah. I can't remember how to say the planet the Pikes are on. I can never say that planet right.
I think it's Obadiah.
Obadiah? Thank you. But they face off on Obadiah. Again, Anakin comes really close to being able to take on Dooku by himself. And then we see him in Revenge of the Sith. And with a little bit of that dark side amp, is able to push him over the line and take Dooku out for good. Ventress.
I remember.
Oh, sorry.
While we're on Dooku, I remember I recently rewatched the. I think it's in season 4 when Obi-Wan goes undercover. And the fight between Dooku and Anakin at the end of that story, there's like a moment, I think it's when Dooku's like using the Force to hold a chair in front of Anakin and he's just like pushing through it. Like there's a moment where Dooku has like, oh crap. Like he's got that kind of like, I need to like throw something at this guy because he's got his saber like an inch and a half from my eyeball. You know, it gets to that point where like you can see the fear in Dooku's eyes that leaks through just for a second from time to time,
and then cuts a Palpatine's shit-eating grin while it's happening.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I got for Anakin's martial arts ability, and I know this is going to be the one that I have, the one that we end up debating.
So I'll go ahead and put out what I've got on Maul. So Maul is a Juyo specialist, the Form 7 of the lightsaber combat, very aggressive form, really taps into the rage of the fighter to put them at the advantage in terms of their aggressiveness in the fight. But despite this, despite being a Juyo specialist, is heavily influenced by Form 4 Ataru, highly acrobatic form, lots of flips and physical implementations in the fighting style, but also he was influenced by the akimbo style Jar Kai, wielding 2 individual blades in each hand, or rather 1 in each hand, 2 altogether. Now, despite his training with 2 blades, he was the master of the saber staff, as we see in not only the Phantom Menace, but in parts of the Clone Wars and Rebels as well. And for a brief and inexplicable and really useless moment in Solo where he just turns it on and then off again. But
intimidation is the weapon of the Sith.
Intimidation, yes.
Also just really cool fan service.
Really, yeah. As if we didn't know who it was, he had to just turn it. Never mind. It's like, you say intimidation, but we both know that the lightsaber was for the fans. It was not for Kira.
Fair enough.
Anyway, so Maul is a Juyo specialist, but master of the saber staff. This means that he has a highly acrobatic fighting style. He will frequently spin his blade. He will frequently flip over his blade. He will frequently employ kicks, not just like kicks to the stomach, like roundhouse kicks, like
butterfly kicks.
Yeah, to the face. And not only that, but he has also been known to employ hilt strikes as well, which is what did in Qui-Gon Jinn, was a hilt strike to the face and then catching him with his blade up over his head and impaling him, running him through. So highly acrobatic, lots of flips and kicks, very flourishy fighting style to keep his enemies on their back foot, but always in control. Very precise movements.
Yeah. He never stops moving, which is something that is very notable.
Right.
Like, he has to keep that momentum going.
Yes, which is an advantage, but if you keep him still, if you're able to confine his movement, that can be a very big disadvantage, and something that we are going to talk about at length moving forward. But yes, again, he's always moving, and he uses that to his advantage, whether he's keeping his enemy at a safe distance when he needs to, but also being able to move in with frightening speed and precision when he's on the offensive. Some of his notable kills, victories, and accomplishments: he killed Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn, the Mandalorian Death Watch leader Pre Vizsla,
without using any of his Force abilities.
Without using Force ability. Like, something you got to give Maul credit. He's a scary guy, but he's also respectable and respectful in a lot of ways. Like, he doesn't have to adhere to fair, like, to sportsman-like fighting, but he does. Like, Pre Vizsla knows how to use a blade. Like, if you wield the Darksaber, you have to know how to use it, and you don't get the Darksaber unless you know how to use one. But Pre Vizsla does not have any Force ability. He has his jetpack, and like, he uses his weapons to advantage, but Maul is still able to beat him in a fair fight, which isn't much of an accomplishment, but like, it just goes to show that Maul knows when he's going to win, and so doesn't always go over the top overkill. He enjoys it a little bit. Anyway, the Jedi Padawan Eldra Caddis from the Maul comic book series, yes?
Yeah.
Yes. Defeated but not killed Obi-Wan Kenobi in The Phantom Menace, defeated the Second Sister in Rebels, as well as Kanan Jarrus, and held Darth Sidious at bay in the Clone Wars during a fight on Mandalore, during which his brother Savage Opress was killed. And finally, interesting feats that he has accomplished: he hunted Rathtars without a lightsaber as part of his training for Sidious, and he has had numerous engagements with large groups with and without his lightsaber. That all being said, for martial arts ability for both people, I think now we can really dive into who would gain the edge in a pitched fight, because this is definitely the highest contested category that we have for these two characters. So, Jared, do you want to start off?
Yeah. So when it comes to just sheer experience with contending against force wielding and lightsaber wielding opponents, Anakin hasn't beat out.
Definitely, for sure. Especially by Revenge of the Sith, he has endured the Clone Wars. Like we've said, he's gone against characters like Dooku and Ventress on a regular basis. You really can't beat him for experience. It's like, Maul's got a lot under his belt, but he does not have what Anakin's got. Like, the list you gave is non-exhaustive, whereas Maul's is more or less exhaustive.
Yeah. Anakin also, this is something that is definitely going to play into the arena. Now, yes. Anakin is very capable of just kind of like planting and fighting. He does not require as much room to operate as Maul does. We've seen Anakin fight very efficiently in confined spaces. He's operating just fine coming through that narrow hallway against Obi-Wan. There's the one fight on Naboo with Count Dooku, where, yes, he loses that confrontation, but a lot of that has to do with the fact that he's jumped by the Magna Guards.
Yes.
But that said, he's still in a very tight space, flourishing around, and going toe-to-toe with somebody whose fighting style is based all around footwork and precision.
Right.
So I don't know that necessarily Anakin is going to be as disadvantaged by a confined space as Maul may be. That said, Maul is definitely capable of dancing circles around him.
Yes.
But I don't know how much of an issue that will be for Anakin, because he has gone toe-to-toe with adversaries who can outspeed him. Ventress
Yes.
comes to mind. Barriss Offee, again, very light on her feet as well.
And not only just in terms of movement, but something that we've touched upon already is that Maul, being a Juyo specialist influenced by Ataru and Jar-Kai and a master of the saber staff, like these are things that Anakin has already seen and dealt with before. Like there's not a whole lot that Maul can throw at him in terms of sheer technique and fighting style that Anakin has not either encountered or overcome in the past. Especially the one character that sticks out in this regard is Ventress, because she uses Jar-Kai most of the time, but then occasionally will interlock her sabers end to end and turn it into a saber staff.
So a more exotic variation on the saber staff as well, where he's dealing with angles that isn't normal for a saber staff either.
Right. And even I think Maul gets the advantage against an uninitiated opponent, where very much like when it comes to Maul, when it comes to Grievous, these like Pong Krell, these like the blades are moving so fast, you don't know what to do. Like you just kind of lock up. It's like an oh my gosh kind of a moment. If you can catch your opponent there, then Maul is going to go to town. But he's not going to get that inherent advantage because Anakin is not intimidated by blades moving that quickly, coming at him that fast. He's able to, like you said, he's able to plant, he's able to stand his ground, and he's able to deal with it to the extent that Maul does not come into the fight with as clear an advantage from the start, just from intimidation or ignorance on his opponent's part. Nothing Maul can throw at him in terms of sheer blade technique is something that Anakin has not dealt with before.
And you're right, and I'm going to go against my guy here in the name of fairness and say, even though that on paper just seeing a saber staff isn't necessarily going to freak Anakin out, or anything like that, like the physical strikes, like things like that, where Anakin can tank a beating.
Yeah.
However, he's never gone toe to toe with somebody who is capable of doing all those things this well.
Correct.
And that is where Maul's contention here really comes into play.
Yeah, this is not a clean sweep for Anakin. We've been really highlighting his advantage here over Maul, but like Maul is still a very dangerous person to go up against, even when you're dealing with a skilled and experienced opponent. The thing that Maul has going for him is that as the battle continues on, he is continually trying different methods to throw his opponent off, to get them off their guard or to catch them on their back foot, whether that be implementing physical strikes, a high kick or a hilt strike, or whether that be changing up the terrain, which we're going to talk about in the tactical and mindset category, or using telekinesis to throw something at your opponent, which we'll talk about in force abilities. But Maul has an incredible ability to read his opponent as the battle continues and not only find what will catch them off guard, but is able to think outside the box in that way. In the instance of the Phantom Menace, is it 2 or 3 times that he's able to kick Obi-Wan in the face and get him to fall hilariously on his ass? Is it just twice?
Yeah, at least twice, and one of which is one of my favorite parts of the whole fight, just the fucking donkey kick.
Yeah. Like, Maul is smart enough to read his opponent and find their weakness and know how long it's going to work on them. But the thing with Anakin is, the reverse side of that is that Anakin is the sort of fighter who learns as he goes as well, where he does not get fooled by the same trick twice. And so it's going to be to Maul's advantage to have such a think outside the box mindset in terms of how can I get my opponent on their back foot. But it's definitely to Anakin's advantage in the sense that it will only work one time each.
Yeah.
which is why this fight is going to be such a marathon.
Yes.
That and many other reasons.
Yeah. So that said, and granted, this is going to tie in more to mindset when we get there. However, I think we do need to talk about the mental state a little bit here, because that is also going to affect the way that they fight.
Yes.
Anakin, whenever he is going into a fight with a clear head, is dangerous.
Very.
However, Anakin, almost in like a video gamey kind of way, kind of has that rage meter going.
Very much so.
And when Maul is involved with the history there with Qui-Gon, I think that there is a certain level of Anakin being wanting to kill Maul more than he necessarily would be, a Dooku or a Ventress.
Yeah.
Like obviously he has history with them, Dooku more than Ventress, of course. But like we don't see him, kind of just have his eyes black out and start foaming at the mouth so much with them. However, we have seen Anakin, lose control, get heated up, and affect his ability to fight, and get trapped in that tunnel vision. That's what cost him his arm and legs on Mustafar.
Yeah.
Was just getting amped up on that rage. And there's a sweet spot there where Anakin becomes incredibly overwhelming and you can't keep up with him.
Very dangerous.
But
if you let it go on too far, then it is to his disadvantage. He's not able to, or at least he loses some of his ability to stay aware of what's going on in the fight, not just with the blade work, but with the surroundings as well.
Yeah, and that's when those kicks to the jaw and
are going
those
to really affect him.
And making him move where the fight is going, that is when that shit starts to add up. That is when you put him in a situation where he is just getting more and more pissed off. And again, it has
losing focus on the match itself.
Yeah, and again, that has the opportunity to backfire where Anakin just loses control. That's scary, but if you keep him far enough away where he can't really cut loose, or you put him in a situation where he cuts loose when he really shouldn't be, that's when Maul can just put a lightsaber through his chest and call it a day. That said, I am leaning towards giving this facet of the matchup calling it a draw.
More, yes. Especially this category is going to be dependent a lot upon the arena that we choose. However, I really hate to say it kind of depends, but like this is such a close match in terms of their fighting style and their mindset and how one person's advantage is the other person's weakness. And so they they balance pretty well, where it really depends on where they're fighting. I don't like to have that kind of a match like, well, who's going to win? Oh, well, it depends on where they're fighting. But that's kind of the nature of this fight. And so I think despite how heavily contested this category is, it's just really not, we're not really able to give a clear advantage until we give a final verdict and it just becomes clear which one is going to take the day.
Yeah. So we can comfortably give no combatant the edge here and call
Not
this
comfortably.
One a stalemate.
For now. Moving right along. Were you going to say that?
Yep.
You said the exact same thing.
Force Bond, baby.
Force Bond. So moving right along to our next category of Force abilities. This one's going to be fairly short, not as consequential, but still has implications for the match.
However, recording this on Saturday the 2nd, after what we saw on the first, we have more to talk about than I think we thought we did.
To talk about. We sat down on Thursday talking about how we were planning to do the Phantom Menace Maul unless we saw something that really changed the game for this week's episode of Clone Wars, and we did. So I'll go ahead and jump into Maul. It's pretty straightforward. Maul's arsenal of Force abilities is very limited but incredibly skillful. The only abilities that we've really seen from Maul are telekinetic, whether it be against people, against objects, against in the most recent season of the Clone Wars, blaster bolts. When Bo-Katan comes at him with her pistols and he just kind of waves them to either side. But again, we're not dealing with a blastered opponent right now, so we can set that aside. We can also set aside something else that we've seen from Maul in Season 7 of the Clone Wars, which is Force interrogation, because there is no opportunity or no usefulness for that in this situation. So we are going to boil Maul's Force ability down.
It does speak to his ability, but not. It's not practical here.
Exactly, it's not a practical fight. It speaks to his force wielding prowess and skill, because neither one of those things are very easy to accomplish. But it's not practical in a pitched fight. So basically, the only ability that we need work with right now for Maul is telekinesis. That being said, he is freaking good at it. It might be the only trick that he's got, but he is really good at it. Whether it be with a force choke, with ragdolling somebody across the room, or calmly pulling panels off of the wall as you walk down a hall of clone troopers blasting at you and just like smashing them to bits and throwing it and cutting their heads off. Like, this guy does not need a lightsaber to be freaky dangerous. And it scares me sometimes. Like, sometimes I roll over in bed and I open my eyes and I'm afraid I'm just going to see Maul right there, and he
with a door.
With a door, and he frisbees that thing across the room and slices my head clean off. That's a blunt instrument, nonetheless.
That's the next game of Star Wars Clue. It was Maul in the corridor with a door.
The door. Brilliant, Stubby.
Yeah. So Anakin, however, does have a lot more to talk about on the basis of Force ability. He has the highest recorded metachlorian count, which gives him a very, very raw connection to the Force.
Right.
Force sensitive bloodlines being its own hot button discussion in the fandom that we're not going to touch on a whole lot. There's a reason why Luke, Leia, and Ben Solo are all incredibly powerful from the jump. Like when you come from, stock that is this powerful, you can only get more powerful. Anakin, however, did favor his power over his skill. And this is going to be a theme that is going to probably come up in most Versus Series matchups that will involve Force wielders. That there is a certain level there's like a certain skill and power balance that needs to be taken into account. However, Anakin is able to rely on his raw power over skill more often than not. He does have a decent force sense on him that is able to give him a little bit of foresight, nothing too crazy powerful, but he does have a good sixth sense with the Force, which aided in his ability as a pod racer, even when he wasn't realizing that's what was happening. Very powerful telekinetic Force. We have seen him just absolutely devastate people with his Force pushes. Force choke is something that even before he turned to the dark side is something he kind of had a little bit of a enjoyment in using.
Guilty pleasure.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it wasn't too guilty. And
he liked it.
Yeah, Anakin's in the choking.
Turd.
We also, and this does kind of tie back to the physical abilities, however, very talented with force-based augmentation. He also did not have an all that powerful force barrier. He was not very talented at defending against telekinetic attacks unless he like clearly saw it coming. We've seen him, block the occasional force push. But again, that only really happened whenever he knew he was about to get hit with one. Aside from that, he doesn't have any real way of defending against energy-based attacks aside from holding up his lightsaber. Luckily for him, that is not going to come into play here. However, he does have a troubled history with Force lightning. That said, the biggest factor here is going to be in how they use the Force.
100%.
And, one could say that the Maul hallway scene on paper could be its own deciding factor, which I would even say there's a lot of validity to that. However, Maul does not use the Force like that ever.
No, not when his lightsaber's out.
That
is, he incorporates it, but he does not rely on it.
And Anakin doesn't so much either. However, Anakin, when he decides to, he decides to. And It is nowhere near as rare an instance for him to just, okay, Force push, and take somebody off their feet with it. However, the likelihood of Maul deciding that he's going to rip everything around him off the walls, off the ground, and
very
start
slim.
Pelting Anakin with it, it's not likely to happen. He is a martial artist and a duelist first and foremost.
And he used, like we said in martial arts ability, if Maul is going to use his Force ability, it is going to be with the intent not of disabling his opponent, but creating enough of a window for him to run them through.
Yeah.
So this, like he's not going to be using. It's. I have a very difficult time envisioning Maul Force gripping Anakin and tossing him across the room. Like, that's not his style.
No.
Not against another Force wielding opponent. That's his style against like lower level life forms with blasters and stuff, just to prove a point. But if he's in the middle of a swinging battle, he's not just going to like Force grip him and whip him across the room just to inflict some pain. Because then he has to cover the distance again.
Yeah, and Anakin's not necessarily going to give him the opportunity to either, because Anakin's never going to stop wailing on him.
True. That's just the nature of Gemso.
Yeah.
And with Maul being Juya, he's not going to take a break from his furious blade action just to be like, I'm going to throw you across the room. It's just not their nature.
And even if he did, that would
sense.
And even if he did, that would mean that Darth Maul is already in a lot of trouble.
Yes, if Darth Maul is reverting to those kind of tactics to get any sort of an advantage whatsoever, he is already in bad shape. So I think based on this, it is pretty clear that in a fighting sense, in their preferred method of going blow to blow, Anakin's Force abilities give him the advantage.
I concur.
It is not a question of which one is just the more powerful, but in their preferred fighting method, which one gets the best use of it, it's going to go to Anakin.
Yeah, head and shoulders. I think he takes that.
Agreed.
This one's going to be rather brief.
Super.
There's not a whole lot to talk about here. For weapons and equipment, Anakin is coming into this fight basically in his Revenge of the Sith outfit, what we've seen him in Season 7 wearing. So, like the black Jedi tunic with the leather tabards, his utility belt, and then his standard blue lightsaber. Not a whole lot to discuss there. We're not going to get into the minutia of the lightsaber itself, though that is entertaining. However, Spencer, your guy.
Right. For my guy, he doesn't have much more, just an extra blade. So Maul is coming into this fight with his double-bladed red staff saber and his Sith robes. Maul is not one to wear a utility belt. He's not your man's man. He's not your warrior's warrior. He is
not necessarily the robes, but like his version of it that he has.
His little tunic.
Yeah.
He was trained.
No real need for pants.
Yeah, there's nothing to hide, you know.
I just realized that Darth Maul is the Clone Wars version of Squidward.
That's incredible. He doesn't need pants, just a nice top.
Somebody make art, please.
But Maul is first and foremost an assassin. He is not a soldier, so he doesn't have a utility belt. But again, as we discussed with the force abilities for Maul, it goes the same way with the utility belt for Anakin. It's not his go-to. Like, the only instance where Anakin pulls out like his little grapple hook from his utility belt is if Maul just like force pushes him down an elevator shaft and he's like, oh crap, I gotta, not hit the ground.
The one time I don't have my utility belt.
Yeah, he's not, like, even if he loses his lightsaber, he's not going to be like, I know what I'll do now. I'll pull out my grappling hook from my utility belt and I will wrap him up real good, giving me just enough time to punch him in the face. No. If he loses his saber, he's going to force right away. There's no utility belt usefulness for this fight.
He'll throw a food capsule at Maul.
An energy bar. So that being said, we can give the weapons and equipment edge to Maul merely in the sense that he's got twice as many of them.
Yeah, which affords him with way more options. It
does. And even in the case that we saw in the Phantom Menace where it gets cut in half, if they're both still usable, he's able to use his Jarkai technique. It's just a very versatile weapon. He could even deactivate one of them and use it like a saber pike if he wanted to, but that's not his preferred method. But he's able to do it if he has to. So yeah, just by nature of Maul having twice as many of the lightsaber blades as Anakin, we're going to give him the edge for weapons and equipment. Moving finally along, Jared, would you please kick off our final and second most highly contested category?
Yes. So for tactics and mindset, Anakin is known for very unconventional tactics. He very much likes to lead from the front as a warrior. He puts as much. He puts himself in danger just as much as he puts the others around him in danger. He's not the type to go kind of shoo off the 501st to go, full crackhead the way he does. Like, if he's telling them to do something insane, he's going to be doing it with them. The way he deals with the droid walkers on Christosis comes to mind, where he just basically deployed that detachment to just jump on top of them. Tactics like that, tactics like at the beginning of the Siege of Mandalore arc where he, commits a war crime with false surrender. I'm sure you're noticing a pattern here with Anakin and war crimes. I don't know what the Star Wars version of the Geneva Conventions looks like, but he's going to have a couple days in court. However, he's one to do the things that wouldn't come to a normal or sane person's mind, which does give him an advantage. He is, again, very aggressive. He can be reckless when it comes to his own life. He, like Maul, loved the thrill of battle. And that's something that they both share, is that they feel at home when a lightsaber is on and just cutting through the air. He has been known from time to time to kind of like use the strategy of flipping his enemy's own strengths against them. That's something kind of picked up from Obi-Wan. It's not necessarily his MO, but we have seen him to great effect. When Dooku tries to throw the chair at him, Anakin just catches the chair with his lightsaber and starts pushing through.
Yeah.
We see him, in the Clone Wars, do the Holdo maneuver before the Holdo maneuver was cool against Admiral Trench. We see him do that. Again, it's not a super common tactic for him, but it's something that is on his mind. That said, personal vendettas have a habit of making him lose control and get very sloppy. There's a reason why Anakin has that Count Dooku is such a good benchmark, is that the amount of times that those fights are ended because Anakin gets a little bit too heated. And he starts calm, he starts in a place where it's manageable, but by the time the fight really gets going, Anakin's screaming at Dooku. He's actively trying to just put Dooku down, and Dooku's just able to dance around it. It's shit like this that damn near gets him killed on Mustafar.
Sure.
Where like he at this point is just so hopped up on the dark side, is so blinded by his strained relationship with Obi-Wan and how contentious they are with each other. He couldn't get all the times that he felt like Obi-Wan was shortchanging him, that took control. He launched himself at Obi-Wan and got cut apart for it. But we've also seen this work to his advantage. This is what lets him beat Ventress on Yavin 4 in the micro series, which, again, take it with a grain of salt, but that was the instance where he's able to overwhelm very quickly. This is what let him finally defeat Count Dooku, was that he was able to crank it up to 11 at the right moment, where he was able to outfence Count Dooku, overpower him, and go faster and harder than him. And that is this really weird glass cannon that Anakin becomes, as to trying to seeing if he can time this the right way. It could go either direction, and it all depends on the person he's fighting and just how, it's weird to say this about a character who's supposed to be a Jedi, but just how badly he wants to kill the other guy.
Yeah.
He is able to kind of keep it controlled. Like we see that with Barriss Offee, where clearly this is personal for him. And there are moments where he is brutalizing Barriss. He force chokes her and whips her into a tree.
It ain't pretty.
It ain't pretty. We see him lose control of the fight with Dooku on Zygeria. He just goes in there and he's already so pissed off with just the fact that he is surrounded by slavers, that once he sees Dooku, that pushes him over the limit. And instead of trying to use the Force to overwhelm Dooku or try to do anything else, the dumbass picks up a whip.
Yeah.
There are some moments where if you catch Anakin at the right time, he will destroy you. But if you get him if you're able to not get overwhelmed by the first outburst, at that point, you just have to make sure you don't piss him off more.
Yeah.
So that's for Anakin. For Lord Maul.
Moving on to Maul. His tactic and mindset is much more precise, I would say. His fighting style is highly calculated. Every move that he makes is is thoughtful and intentional. And he, despite what is going on, despite what his opponent is doing, and even when he is overwhelmed for a moment, or he's caught off guard, or his flow is broken up for a second, he always maintains control, and he does not let it affect him outright. It would be very difficult. I think the only instance where this happens is the instance where he dies, where the only mistake he makes is the one that makes him dead. That only happens one time, and it is with Obi-Wan. That
makes him dead. Make dead.
But if you look at his fight with Obi-Wan in The Phantom Menace, he won that fight. Even when he got his saber cut in half by Obi-Wan, he was back on his feet. He did his little backflip and he was back with it, going blow to blow with Obi-Wan again. And when he gets knocked on his ass that same time, he's back on his feet. He does not stay down or stay on his back foot for very long. He's usually able to recover. Now, that being said, like I said, the only instance where he does not have the opportunity to recover is in his fight with Obi-Wan on Tatooine when he finally dies.
Yeah.
But that's before this. So his mindset, he's always in control. He's a very environmental fighter. He uses force abilities to distract and catch his opponent off guard from his surroundings, whether they be, crates on the ground or pulling stuff off of walls to throw at his opponent just to catch them off guard for a split second, or whether that means using the varying levels of a terrain to his advantage and drawing his opponent to a position that is more favorable to him. He's very much aware of his environment while he is fighting, and he uses it to his advantage. He also, just by nature of, being a black and red horny son of a gun, has the level of fear and intimidation.
So do you want to take another shot at the way you just described him?
Sure. A black and red horned son of a gun. Thank you. You take one look at this guy. He activates both of his lightsaber blades and starts running at you, spinning them like crazy. Like, holy cow, that's terrifying. Yeah. Just his mere presence, his demeanor, the way he talks is horrifying. Like, calm Maul is what I come back for. Not because I'm like, ooh, I like calm Maul. He's so romantic. Like, he's so comforting. Like, it's just it really makes me feel really at ease. No. I come back for calm Maul because he is terrifying by just standing there and talking in a voice like this. Ugh, it's chilling. The man is terrifying. And he uses this to his advantage.
Not only that, he's a sex symbol the way he's sitting on the Mandalorian throne.
Oh my gosh, yes.
I think that's mixtape album art material. I will say this much. I think one of Maul's biggest shortcomings as a tactician is his arrogance.
Oh, for sure.
Not only does he, like you called out the battle on Tatooine with Obi-Wan, he plays in, and this is, the first time it ever really happens that he plays into somebody else's strategy. He does it completely, and as you said, makes him dead. We also have the fact that Obi-Wan Kenobi was dead to rights on Naboo. Yeah. And I think that this is where the mindsets between Anakin and Darth Maul are really going to affect each other, because Maul enjoys taking those digs. Maul enjoys, reveling in what he perceives to be his victory. And this is why I think that even if Maul is able to weather the first wave of Anakin getting pissed off, Maul's going to make it happen a second time. And I don't think he can handle that. I come back to the fact that, again, everybody goes, well, why didn't Darth Maul just kill Obi-Wan? He was hanging off the thing. Just throw your lightsaber down like a spear. Yes, you're right, he could have, but he wanted to scare him. He wanted to make Obi-Wan's final moments alive be filled with terror.
Again, this is a creature who is bred for destroying Jedi. His entire purpose from the time that Sidious trained him till the time Sidious said, I don't need you anymore, his whole purpose was to hunt down and destroy Jedi. He is an assassin. And so he is going to use that fear, that enjoyment to his advantage when he can, but it so rarely is that. Yeah. It's more often a liability for him.
And, there are certain people who their anger isn't an amp for them. It's something that they, especially because he fights so many Jedi, it's something that will throw them off kilter when they start to feel it. Obi-Wan comes to mind. Obi-Wan did pressure Maul in the Phantom Menace, but eventually Obi-Wan overextended and ended up a few inches away from death. Yeah. In the same way, the first rematch Maul and Obi-Wan had, Maul was able to overcome Obi-Wan just by invoking Qui-Gon Jinn.
Yeah.
And
that's the sort of a move that could also work against Anakin.
Yeah, it could work against Anakin to make him snap. But when he snaps, you need to be ready to ratchet yourself up to 11 and try to come back from it. And it's not something I think you'd necessarily be able to pull off. Which, again, that's also going to... Again, this, everything else, is going to play into the arena. Because if Maul is in a tight space and then starts making comments about Qui-Gon, Anakin is going to blast through it. However, if Maul is able to like change the terrain and start taunting Anakin and start talking a whole lot of shit, Anakin's going to, you underestimate my power, and just get himself cut in two vertically.
Yes. Maul's best chance at victory is getting himself in a very favorable physical position and then eliciting a response from Anakin that makes him overextend even by just a couple inches, just by like the tiniest bit. If Maul can exploit that for a killing blow, then the match is his.
Yeah.
But if he tries to revel in his advantage for too long, and again, I will contend that earlier, whenever I said with his, I think I covered this in martial ability, that he's always using kicks and strikes and like forced distractions to get the advantage, and he thinks outside the box. I think if this fight goes on long enough, he will realize that he will only get one shot, and he's not going to be so concerned about the arrogance. Like, he's going to realize this isn't just some guy that I can keep taunting and really enjoy this kill. This is a, you will get only one shot at this. You'd better take it and make it count. I think that while Maul's biggest liability, like you said, is his arrogance, his need for his opponent to feel his blade as it like scrapes across their chest or across their neck or whatever, I think he's also smart enough to know that if the battle goes on for long enough, he's only going to get one shot, and he's going to have to take it.
I think that would be more true with most other fighters. However, we need to take into account the relationship that even though Vader and Maul and Anakin haven't quite crossed paths in any real way, aside from Maul almost running him over, there is the very clear reality that Maul wants Anakin in the same way he wants Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
Which changes the you get one shot. Because he had several one shots against Obi-Wan and didn't take it. And granted, he does a whole, oh, I don't want to kill you, I want to make you suffer, but like,
yeah,
the ending of the suffering ends in him killing him.
Yeah,
you know, like in that moment where he has Obi-Wan on his knees, he just wants to make him watch him kill Satine. Maul isn't going to keep Obi-Wan in prison for the rest of his life. He's going to kill everybody that Obi-Wan has left, and then he's going to kill him once he has nothing left to live for. Maul sees Anakin, even though he doesn't say the words, it is clear that Maul sees Anakin as the latest replacement. In the same way that he loathed Dooku for being the one to take his spot, to take what was rightfully his, and take him out of the grand plan and steal away his destiny. Anakin more so, because now not only has he been replaced again, now he's been replaced by the fucking punk that Kenobi trained. You know, like this. Even though he does not have a direct beef with Anakin, this is even more personal than Obi-Wan. So I will push back on you and say that I don't think Maul would be as clued into that. Like, he's freaking out. This is the one chance I get. He wants to milk this. He wants to take the time and revel in it. And again, he could keep amping him up and make Anakin get sloppier and sloppier and sloppier and capitalize on that advantage. I don't think he's going to. I think he's going to keep pissing him off, but there's going to come a point where Anakin reaches that critical mass and crushes him. You know, or is it at the very least prepared to crush him? And I don't think Maul is going to be as cognizant of that because, you know, like Anakin, these grudges are what break him. You know, against any other Jedi, he would be able to go, okay, here it is, boom, done. But this is another situation where he's like, I want you to feel nothing but dread and pain while I take your life. Because he wants to prove a point to Anakin, he wants to prove a point to Palpatine, and he wants to prove a point to himself.
That's a good point. I'll give you that. I will give you that. So for the tactics and mindset category. Stubby, how are you leaning?
A thin, like paper thin edge to Anakin Skywalker.
I was going to say the same. We're on the same page, thank goodness. So Anakin Skywalker gets a paper thin edge for tactics and mindset. Just one more time before we move into our hypothetical fight breakdown, I'm going to go through the categories one more time. We gave the physical advantage to Maul. It was a draw for martial arts. Anakin gets the advantage for force abilities. Maul gets the advantage for weapons and equipment. And Anakin gets a paper-thin advantage for tactics and mindset. Now, are you ready?
This is where the fun begins.
Without further ado, we are going to enter into our hypothetical, theoretical fight breakdown to determine the final victor. Before we do that, we have to choose our arena. So we have them listed from 1 to 10. I'm going to run through them one more time before we ask my phone to give us a random number from 1 to 10. They are the carbon freezing chamber on Bespin, the landing pad on Utapau, the hangar bay on the Death Star, the parade ground on Starkiller Base, Maz's castle from Takodana, the Geonosian arena, the treetop houses on Kashyyyk, the shield generator bunker on Endor, Hondo's outpost on Florum, and Echo Base on Hoth. Those are our drafted arenas. Now, for our arena, hey Siri, pick a number from 1 to 10.
A random number between 1 and 10 is 7.
Didn't we get 7 for the test run?
We did.
Okay,
do it on Google just to diversify it.
Okay, let's do this again. Sorry, friends. We just want to make sure that this Siri isn't rigged here.
Yeah, we got to be fair, especially because that's one of the arenas we've gotten an arena that is preferred to Anakin twice.
Yes,
the same arena twice.
Okay. Okay, good. I found one that works. Between 1 and 10. I wish there was a way that I could verify this so you know that I'm not rigging it, but I just got it pulled up on my computer. If only Siri could read it for us without picking 7 every time. I'm going to click generate a random number 5 times without looking, and then I'm going to look at the screen. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The number is 4. Arena number 4 is the parade ground on Starkiller Base. Ooh. Okay. So, Starkiller Base. For those of you who don't know, the parade ground is a pretty wide open space. If you've seen The Force Awakens, it is where Hux gives his Nazi speech before destroying the Hosnian system.
In terms of terrain, the way we were envisioning it is basically how it is, like how the map is in Battlefront 2.
So you have some levels to work with, not it's a very open space, but you've got landing craft, you've got various levels from the parade level to the hangar bay level. Stubby, you want to keep elaborating?
Yeah. So like you know, there's the TIE fighters that are landed there. You have the troop transports. There are, like he said, like that kind of that staircase leading up to the stage, and then like a couple like the fuel center. There's a lot to work with here. That said, now that we know it, Darth Maul gets the martial arts advantage.
Yes, especially with the spaciousness of the arena, with the amount of levels he has to work with, whether it's just jumping up on top of a troop transport or jumping up into the hangar or onto a platform. Like, he's got plenty. This is his jungle gym. He's got plenty of space to work with, and that makes him a very dangerous opponent in this arena.
And lots of, crates and barricades and things to just rip off the ground and whip at Anakin, or, throw around to knock stuff over, maybe like tip over a TIE fighter to, cause some obstruction in the path.
Darth Maul, with this map, very much has the ability to make it his own. It's like his virtual sandbox. He can use whatever he wants to whatever effect he wants. Now, that being said, let us go into our theoretical fight breakdown here, how we envision a fight between these two characters going. Not necessarily blow to blow, but as the fight progresses, we're going to outline how the tactics they would use, and the tactical mindset as they continue through. So,
Anakin's going to be the aggressor,
especially right out the gate. Maul is going to. Well, first of all, we're just going to see. We made the joke that we're going to start like pistols at 10 paces. They just kind of like show up. They're like approximately 10 feet away. We made the joke that Anakin's probably going to do like a back flip toward Maul like he did in episode 3. But they start apart, and then Anakin's definitely going to take the offensive from the beginning. And Maul is going to keep his footing, but he's going to be analyzing Anakin's aggressiveness, his fight pattern, stuff like that, not necessarily to hone exactly in on what he's doing, but to get an idea of his fighting style and how he's going to be coming at Maul for the rest of the match.
Yes. That is a very similar strategy to what he did during the Duel of the Fates.
Yes, just getting his pacing from the beginning so he knows what he's dealing with from then on.
Yeah, and I feel so bad for my boy. This was this was the worst case scenario for Anakin.
This was. I can send you a picture, Stubby, of the random number generator.
I believe you.
That I have open. But when we decided, like, okay, this would be best case scenario for Maul, and this would be best case scenario for Anakin. Starkiller Base was best case scenario for Maul. Poor guy. We have it in our outline here in the wrap-ups category to address points of contention. So we can definitely address how a fight on a different arena would go.
Yeah.
In that point, but we've got our map.
We have Starkiller Base right now.
We do.
So Anakin doesn't like sand, but he's about to like snow a whole lot less.
That's right. So Anakin's coming at him on the offensive pretty aggressively from the start. That's just the nature of his fighting style, being Gemso. Incorporating flips and acrobatic movements where necessary because of his Utaru influences. And Maul is going to be, to the best of his ability, which is pretty good, taking control of the situation by letting Anakin establish the pace.
Yeah.
He is going to not be on his back foot, but he's going to be backpedaling as Anakin's coming at him until he can figure out his pacing, his fighting style, and how much it's going to take to get him at a disadvantage.
Yeah, and with factors like that, Anakin is going to get more and more frustrated as the fight goes on. Like, aside from like you're the guy who killed Qui-Gon Jinn. Yeah. I'm going to make sure your head is on the floor now. Aside from that mentality, like, he's going to keep getting more and more frustrated every time Maul, introduces some amount of subterfuge.
Yes. Every time Maul changes the status quo, Anakin's going to get amped up a little bit more.
Because he's going to get frustrated with that. And, Anakin's style of rolling with the punches, like, he can handle somebody shifting their style of combat on him. He can't handle the transition of the fight completely changing.
Yeah,
as well.
especially if Maul takes it up a level literally.
Yeah.
And force especially with a multi-leveled map like Starkiller Base, Maul is definitely going to be taking the fight where he wants it, and introducing that change is going to, like you said, it's going to frustrate Anakin. But Maul has enough space to work with where it is not putting him in a bad position to be introducing these frustrations to Anakin. It's not going to put him in a place where he's in a tight corridor and all he has to do, or all Anakin has to do, is overpower him for a couple seconds and he's done. He can deal with it for a couple seconds and then do a backflip off of whatever or onto whatever to get himself some preferable footing for a little while.
Yeah, and one of the other things that really needs to be taken into consideration is that Anakin is not I'm going to move the fight where I want it to be. Vader is. Vader is. Anakin Skywalker
he can't
is
move
not.
as well.
Yeah, he has to. So Anakin is not going to recognize, I can get Maul to follow me up the staircase, where his saber starts hitting everything in the way and Anakin can power through him. That's not where Anakin's mind is going to go. He's not going to try to put Maul in those tight corners where he can't move, because that's just not where his brain goes in a fight. That's not what his focus is. There's also the fact that Anakin is not very good at recognizing when he's being led around. That's what Obi-Wan does to him on Mustafar. Obi-Wan Kenobi is the one who makes that fight go everywhere that it does.
Right.
The only real dictation of where the fight goes that Anakin decides is just by kicking Obi-Wan close to a door. And Obi-Wan's like, okay, I'm going this way now. Come get me. That's what Barriss does to him. Come get me. Dooku, come get me. The Anakin is consistently, even in fights that he wins, gets led around by his nose. And that is going to hurt him here, because he is going to happily follow Maul. He is just going to keep going wherever Maul is going.
Yeah.
No matter how many boxes he takes to the face, no matter how many TIE fighters get pulled down in front of him, he's going to keep trying to pursue Maul. And because of that, and because of the fact that he does not handle those transitions well, he is not the person who can just drop down and get right back into the fight. When he drops down, he's like, okay, I'm here. All right. And gets back into that stance where Maul is way more fluid with that. And I hate that it's happening, because I made this comment to you the other day. I don't want this fight. I don't want this to basically be a meme and turn into Maul wins because he has the high ground.
Yeah.
But Maul's going to win because he has the high ground. Maul is going to win because he can make Anakin put himself in a compromising position and open himself up. Obi-Wan is amazing at those very small, brief openings.
Yeah.
That's why he wins that fight, because he puts Anakin in a situation where he is able to completely disable him. And Anakin follows along. Maul is amazing at keeping the area of combat so clear for him to be able to, jump around and dodge and flip and all this. I think I'm not happy. I think Darth Maul wins the day on Starkiller Base.
But what we need to acknowledge is that, like we thought this fight is a long one. This is a marathon.
Yeah, it goes on forever.
It goes on forever and ever. And the only reason that it ends is because Maul is able to throw Anakin off his guard a little bit at a time for so long that he's able to find enough of an opening that he can exploit it without Anakin realizing the mistake that he made until it's too late.
Yeah.
And that's going to take a long time to accomplish.
And I think that I think we're looking at something like the Battle of the Heroes.
Yes.
And again, I don't want it to necessarily be strictly I have the high ground, but I think Maul is smart enough to recognize that by the time that he has thrown Anakin off with enough environmental diversions, that there will come a point where Maul eyes up that stage.
Yeah.
Like where like the giant First Order flag is, where he just looks up there and goes, this will require so much strength to just jump up here for him that he doesn't have, quite frankly, anymore.
Yeah.
That he's going to force him into a situation where Anakin has to overextend himself to get back to Maul. And I think that is where the fight will end. And again, all high ground jokes aside, that's the best strategy here. And I think that's what Maul would latch on to, is that after pelting Anakin with everything that's not bolted down to the floor and, beating him and hurting him both mentally and physically, that since Maul has the room to get the fuck away from Anakin, that he will be able to put Anakin in a compromising position. I hate it that I really do see Maul just jumping onto that stage and Anakin coming right up behind him, and then Maul just like putting the saber through his chest and then slamming him back down to the ground.
Yeah, it's not it is a very tough fight to call, but the arena makes such a difference. It's the nature of these two fighters that the space you put, especially Maul, the space you put Maul in is going to be what determines most of the fight. So I think we are both in agreement at this point that in a pitched battle between Revenge of the Sith, Anakin Skywalker, and Siege of Mandalore era Darth Maul, Maul is going to take the day, but only after a 30, 40, 50, 60 plus minute fight when both of these marathon fighters are exhausted, but one is able to find his advantage a little bit along the way, that we are going to see Maul emerge victorious.
Yeah, and there's no way that neither of them are walking away from this fight without considerable injury.
Yeah. In the words of Paul Rudd in Captain America Civil War, like Darth Maul is going to be like hobbling onto his ship like, does anyone have any orange slices? Like he's going to feel like he just did an Iron Man after he gets on that ship with Anakin slumped over on the stage up there. Like, it is not going to be a pretty fight for either one of them.
No, not by any means. Away. Like, I have this image in my mind of like Maul just beaten and bloody, like robe ripped apart, a couple horns cracked. Yeah. Just with how much Anakin, again, like Anakin does not do the physical attacks as often as Maul, but when he gets close enough to, he punches people, like, because he knows that metal hand hurts.
Yes.
He punches Obi-Wan right in the jaw. I'm pretty sure that had he not cut it off, he broke Count Dooku's wrist.
Yeah.
With the way he grabs him on the invisible hand. So, Darth Maul is the victor.
Maul takes the day. Now, as a wrap-up, we're just going to entertain the hypothetical that the arena was to Anakin's advantage. Now, we determined that the best situation for Anakin, arena-wise, would be something like the carbon freezing chamber on Bespin or something like the landing pad on Utapau, where once Maul starts to implement these mind games, like to get him angry, like bringing up, Qui-Gon or bringing up Obi-Wan, like their previous encounters, and getting inside Anakin's head where he starts to get on that rage-fueled nitrous, kick in this fight. If Maul does not have this space to work with in the carbon freezing chamber, and he gets caught in a corner or with the limited space up or down, or if he gets caught, I think you said, Stubby, like the worst case scenario for him is like within the apparatus itself where he has nowhere to go.
Yeah. Or not necessarily like inside, like where he would get frozen theoretically, but like that area where you have the control panel and all the tubing. And like in that area where you can't move a staff. And there's also the fact that even when Maul fights single-bladed, when he's using his staff, he doesn't use it like a light pike. He uses it like it's a single-bladed lightsaber.
Yes.
Like he does not do like he, because like in theory you should still be spinning that thing as much as you can to maintain the momentum. He just swings it like a lightsaber with a comically long hilt.
Yeah, and that's bad news for his fighting style, especially in that small space. The other version of this situation on something like the treetops of Kashyyyk or the landing pad of Utapau, again, even though you have a little bit more space for Maul to work with, you have a very deadly situation outside of that where if you push Anakin to the limit and he starts to get in that rage-fueled hyperdrive, all it takes is for him to just with like a single unbelievably strong and concentrated force push ragdoll Maul to his death off of the landing pad on Utapau, where if you land at all, it's gonna be probably on the rocks.
Yeah,
not in the water. Like there's no the thing where Obi-Wan gets shot off the cliff and lands in the water. That is the luckiest thing I've seen. Oh,
and even then, like we said, Anakin is less and less. Anakin is not likely to use his force abilities in combat very often, but it's in the moments where he is starting to get pissed off that he will let that loose, and he will put all his force behind it. And even if Maul, and that's another thing we should have touched up top, is that we're not necessarily calculating this as a fight to the death. Like,
yeah,
it's a fight to the pain. No, as long as if you can incapacitate the opponent or create a situation where the fight is ended,
you win.
Now more often than not, that's going to be you putting the pointy end in the other guy.
Right.
But even if Maul is put in a situation where he does not fall to his death and break every goddamn bone in his body, he has been completely removed from the fight by Anakin.
Yeah.
So like even if he does not end up like impaled on a bunch of like stalactites in that grotto on Utapau, he's still been just whipped into the water with no way to get back to Anakin.
Yeah.
So even if he doesn't die in the process, he has still been outright removed. And if he gets thrown off the treetop village, like I hope somebody's down there to clean it up, because that is going to be messy.
Splat.
Between the guts and the machinery, like that is just not going to be a good place to be.
Yeah. It is my sincere hope that there are very few episodes where the arena that is chosen mid recording is going to be what determines the outcome of the fight. I'd really like to be able for most of our Versus Series matchups to be a blow for blow, tactic on tactic, skill on skill sort of a determination.
Yeah.
Not necessarily a where did they happen to meet each other. But in this case, the tactical mindset of each opponent very much depends on what they have to work with. And so for that reason, this outcome was pretty one-sided for Maul for the arena. But hopefully for those of you who are really pissed off that we gave Maul the victory over Anakin, hopefully after we explained our reasoning and gave you the situation where Anakin would have an advantage arena-wise, hopefully you don't come after us in the comments or anything.
Please do. That's up to you.
If you want to rip our heads off and tell us what you think, we encourage that as well. It at least encourages healthy debate. But no matter what you do, if you enjoyed this, and even if you didn't, especially if you didn't, because then you can get on our Discord and give us an earful for it. But if you enjoyed this episode, then please make sure to subscribe to our Patreon and support this channel to get more exclusive content like this whenever it is first published. Thank you so much for coming out. If you hated it, sign up for our Patreon anyway, so then you get access to our Patreon only Discord servers where
you can cuss
tear
us
our
out.
heads off there. We welcome angry and peaceful debate, both. And
3.
Stubby, would you care to introduce our listeners to the next matchup that we are planning.
Yes. So the next matchup that you guys can expect sometime in June is going to be the Negotiator, Obi-Wan Kenobi himself versus Mace Windu. After this week's episode of Clone Wars, everybody's been ragging on Mace. So this will be a fun one to bring up because apparently everybody's on the fuck Mace Windu train, and I done been there. Even though I love Mace, fuck Mace.
Mace Windu is Snoke. You heard it here.
Oh, go straight to hell. To hell.
That is still my favorite Snoke theory, even though we know that it's garbage now. I just kind of like it. Anyway.
Hey, Steele said it first. Your Snoke theory sucks.
Your Snoke theory sucks.
With that, Spencer, where can the lovely people find you?
Hi, guys. You can find me on Instagram at SpencemanCosplay and on Twitter at SpenceMan49. I just want to personally thank you guys all again for listening. It's been something that Jared and I have been looking forward to for quite a while now, and it's really our privilege.
Yeah, this has been a blast and so much fun, and I can't wait to do Kenobi versus Windu. That's going to be a fun one.
Yes. Stubby, where can the lovely people find you?
You guys can find me on Twitter and Instagram at DarkJedi2552. Be sure to check out the Nerd Academy podcast on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, as well as our website, www.thenerdacademypodcast.com, where if you're listening to this on May the 4th on our normal podcast feed, if you're feeling generous and want to get more of this content, you can chuck in a couple credits to our Patreon and get access to this stuff for the rest of your